Today's passage to read comes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 34, which says, "Never has there arisen a prophet like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face." This is quite an obituary. And reading the Moses narratives in the Old Testament, you might wonder at such a positively glowing accolade. Moses had been through some very tough times indeed. His life was far from easy, and he'd repeatedly complained to God about how unreasonably hard it was to obey God's calling. It was a long and complex life, from the risk of death as a newborn to the ease of palace life, to flight as a fugitive of justice, to leading and escaping people of asylum seekers, to struggling to survive in a hostile environment with them for endless years, trying to keep the people faithful to God in the face of repeated failures, and so on. Now the time of his death has come, and he's given a vision of what the future holds for the people, the fulfillment of God's promise of a new land to live in, a land of plenty. He would not see this himself, but he could die in the confidence that it would happen. Joshua was to take over, and he would lead the people on. What a roller coaster of a life Moses had. You couldn't make it up, really. In the midst of all those difficulties, he spent time with God, time in intimate companionship and conversation with God, so close that it was said that his face shone with the glory of God, so bright that they couldn't look at it, and he had to wear a veil. From the moment at the burning bush to the times on Mount Sinai when he received the 10 Commandments, God spoke with Moses face to face, as one speaks with a friend. Isn't that beautiful? In the New Testament, the figure of Moses becomes a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, appearing with him at the Transfiguration, discussing the Exodus, the departure that Jesus was about to complete at Jerusalem. Matthew's Gospel is structured like the 5 books of Moses, presenting Jesus as the new Moses, only greater than he. And Jesus said to his disciples, "I no longer call you servants, but I call you friends. For everything I've known of the Father, I've made known to you." Moses stood between God and the people, mediating for them and pleading for them to be forgiven over and over again. In the New Covenant now, we are friends of Jesus, friends of God, and in our prayer, we speak to God directly. It may not feel like that when you pray. It often doesn't. But remember how Paul put it in 1 Corinthians 13. "Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known." It feels rather presumptuous to compare oneself with Moses. But in this respect, we have a privileged position. Under the new covenant, we are friends of God. I used to give a talk about this at a child's baptism, using a toy tadpole which turns inside out to become a frog. Fascinating to children. And I said, when your child is baptized and comes out of the water, they are transformed into a frog, where frog, not many people know this, is an acronym standing for Friend of God. Not very sophisticated, but it caught their imagination and they remembered it. Next time you say your prayers, remember that phrase said of Moses. He spoke with God face to face as one speaks with a friend. And speak with God as with a friend.